revered national talk show host invades America. Here's Michael Savage.
Well, it surely is a savage nation. Welcome to the once savage nation. Once savage nation. Clinton and Gore have turned this country into a hapless eunuch. Welcome to the savage nation. As you well know, there is war in the Middle East. One of our ships has been attacked by Arab terrorists off the coast of Yemen. And the question to you right off the top is, we've lost 6 men, 12 are missing, 30 injured. What should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on a U.S. warship? 1-800-449-8255. I want the people to speak, not the sheeple to peek. I want the people to speak, not the sheeple to peek. I do not want any more of these paid pimps of the media telling... Did you see William Cohen, the defense secretary? That man ought to be fired for what he did today. We had dead servicemen, and he had the nerve, that Cohen, that mad bomber, he had the nerve to get up there and say, we don't know what caused this explosion. His own admiral then followed him and said the explosion was caused by terrorists. This is what we have now speaking for us. We have these phony corporate guys and dolls. What would you, the American people, say should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship? This is a gaping attack upon our sovereignty, and under Clinton and Gore, we have become a hapless eunuch in the world stage. Now, I'll tell you something. There was a time in American history when we had men with balls as the captains of a ship, instead of lesbians, instead of homosexuals, instead of incompetent minorities pushed through by affirmative action. We had Admiral Halseys in charge of our ships. And I'll tell you, we don't have an Admiral Halsey in charge of our ships today. We don't even have an admiral with a ballsy in charge of our ships today. It's a disgrace what's going on. There was a time in our history when a warship of the United States of America in a foreign port, if it was attacked in a foreign port, the captain had utter authority to fire on his own will, and what he could have done was fire and raise half the town to the ground and say, you sort out who did this. Mr. Yemen, you're in the capital of your city. We don't know who did it. You'll find out who did it. So we're going to blow up the Parliament building. We'll blow up your police headquarters. We will fire with everything we have because you have almost destroyed our warship. Instead, we have a bunch of clowns in the Clinton-Gore administration wringing their hands, grabbing their brochures, and screaming, oh, what do we do now? This is bad for fundraising. Oh, what do we do now? It's bad for fundraising. What do we do now? It's bad for the stock market. What do we tell the American sheeple? It's bad for Gore. This is the kind of response you get when you have Neville Chamberlain running the United States Navy instead of Admiral Halsey. Number 2, on the Savage Nation, why is the FBI overseeing this investigation of the terrorist attack on a U.S. warship on foreign soil? Who made Janet Reno the boss over our U.S. military? We have naval intelligence. It is their job to find out who blew up that ship. Why is the FBI being given this authority? Answer, so that it goes through Janet Reno, who reports directly to the president. The fact of the matter is, it's another grab of power. Number 3, which candidate is better able to handle foreign affairs, Bush or Gore? Now, here's my analysis. The biggest loser here today, the biggest loser is Clinton and Gore. They spent 8 years and billions of dollars placating Arafat and destroyed Israel's right-wing party under Netanyahu to give peace a chance. And so they put the stooge Barak in, the left-wing Barak. Well, peace has had its chance. Arafat was offered 95%. I repeat, Arafat the terrorist was offered 95% of his demands by the left-wing stooge Barak and his government, the left-wing government of Israel, the puppets of the Clinton-Gore Albright triangle. And what did Arafat say to the 95%? He said, drop dead, 100% or violence, and so he declared violence. So Gore is Neville Chamberlain, and Arafat is the Hitler of our time. On small scale, nevertheless, that's a replay of history. And Israel today needs an ally in America, not a hand-wringing broker. And that's what they got. If you've seen the footage today of the Israeli reservists being beaten to death by a mob, you'll know what I'm talking about. There is good and there's evil. There's right and there's wrong. These were not soldiers in the field. These were reservists, like your son, like your daughter. They were reporting to duty. They were in a car. They made a wrong turn into so-called Arab territory, but since Arafat wants apartheid, since Arafat wants ethnic cleansing, Arafat's mobs chased them. The Israelis ran into a police station that was supposed to protect the order of the town. The police let the mob in. The mob beat them to death. The mob then hung them by ropes and threw them into the street. This is what you got, Mr. Clinton and Mr. Gore. 40,000 Palestinians given machine guns to guard the peace. Instead, they've turned them onto the peacemakers. And so that's the story. The real loser today is Al Gore. He ought to resign in shame. He ought to resign in shame for what he has done to this world. That's my opinion. But the issue to us as Americans today is not Israel, really. The issue to us as Americans is what should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship. Don't for 1 minute believe the double-talking phony named Cohen, that he doesn't know who did it, and he'll investigate it. It'll take him 70 years, and he'll tell you he still doesn't know. Everyone with a brain knows it's related to what's going on. And it just shows you how weakened our military is. It just shows you how horribly destroyed the morale and the basic sensitivities of our military has become. When in history would a naval warship not have men with machine guns standing by when they see a small raft show up, not to machine gun these guys into the water and let them die with the sharks? They must have known they were there. What were they doing? They were refueling a ship in Yemen. They see two guys come up on a raft. Why didn't they invite him aboard for a prayer session? Maybe they should have invited the two Arab terrorists aboard for a diversity training session. Maybe they should have invited him aboard to tell him how evil Christianity is. The fact of the matter is this could have been avoided if the sailors had not been beaten to death with diversity training, if their normal sense of surveillance, if their normal sense of diligence, if their normal sense of fear of these foreigners was permitted to play, they would be alive today. That ship wouldn't have been blown up. But because their brains have been washed by diversity training, they did nothing when that raft showed up. That's my estimation of what happened. This never would have happened in the past if we had a real man in power instead of a person like Bill Clinton, a Neville Chamberlain like Al Gore. And so, therefore, I turn it over to you, the people. 1-800-449-8255. I want to know what you suggest we do as Americans against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on a U.S. warship. This is a declaration of war by any means whatsoever. And, of course, you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear that from anybody, are you? Well, I don't know what else to say except say it like it is. So I'll simply take your opinion. Cal at Nellis Air Force Base, you're on the Savage Nation. What's your opinion?
Yes, Dr. Savage. We're in Nellis Air Force Base at north of Las Vegas. We couldn't even machine gun those people if we wanted to because our Marines and our soldiers, we're not allowed to have loaded guns at the ready on deck. They're all locked up down below.
Locked up below?
Yes, the guns, those troops on the deck of that ship did not have even a sidearm to defend themselves. They're all locked up when making a call in a port like that.
Well, I guess they wanted to have them aboard for a tea session and a diversity training session. Maybe they should have invited them aboard and then gotten on their hands and knees and apologized for Christianity. That's what diversity training is in America. If you think we don't have the boll weevils trying to undermine America right here in our own corporate offices, you're crazy. I've gone through diversity training. I've had them try to make me knuckle under to them, and I told them to drop dead. And I didn't lose my job as a result. I said, drop dead. You have no right coming in here and insulting me, my religion, and my people. Go screw yourself. I was the only one who stood up. It wasn't pleasant because my co-workers looked at me like I was wrong and I was crazy. I am telling you, we have a crisis not only on our naval ships, we have a crisis here in America in our boardrooms who are caving in and catering to these terrorists. We have terrorists in our own country. Now, these are some of the questions. What should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship is the question of the day. And, of course, the phone number is 1-800-449-8255. You're listening to the Savage Nation. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. We have a crisis going on worldwide. As you well know, one of our naval ships has been blown up. There are at least 6 U.S. servicemen dead. 12 are missing, which means that their bits and pieces have not been found. Approximately 35 are being reported wounded. Yet our hand-wringing phony poet of a defense secretary, the unindicted war criminal William Cohen, had the nerve to say he doesn't know what caused this explosion. What was he implying, that some of the men were doing a pipe of crack underneath the ship? What, is he out of his mind? His own admiral then got on the news and said this was a terrorist attack. It just shows you what happens when you have a weak-kneed phony in a position of power like Cohen. He should be forced to resign, and a new defense secretary, somebody with real courage, put in there. What should be done today, immediately, against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship? Now, let's look at Israel. The Israelis lost 3 soldiers who were butchered today by a mob of bloodthirsty, cutthroat Arabs in a police station, no less. The bodies were beaten, and then the bodies thrown out of a window and beaten further, chopped to pieces. A few hours later, Israel gave a 40-hour warning or some sort to the town and said, we're going to retaliate. They then launched helicopter gunships, which launched rockets. They destroyed the police station where the soldiers were killed. They destroyed Arafat's headquarters by the sea, etc. In other words, there was an answer. We have a weak-kneed, peacenik president who either doesn't act or overreacts. When he overreacts, the world could go up in flames. He overreacted against Yugoslavia because he has a psychotic Secretary of State named Madeleine Halfbright, who, instead of negotiating through diplomatic sources with Milosevic, she bombed a sovereign nation called Yugoslavia. She bombed downtown Belgrade. She killed 2,000 innocent Serbian people. That was her answer. I fear what these maniacs are liable to do tomorrow. Either they don't act or they overreact because they're hysterics. And you'll often find that people who have never fired a gun or who have never been in a fist fight, they're the most dangerous people to be given power. They don't know what a weapon can do to people, and so therefore they will tend to overuse the weapon. They don't even understand what it's like to bleed because they've never been punched in the nose. And again, so they're liable to punch people in the nose too hard. I fear for the world. I think we're in a very, very dangerous place with these hysterics, these hysterical Fabian utopias, if you want to call them that. If you want to be benevolent and call them Fabian utopias, I don't even believe they really were utopians. I believe that they were conciliatory traitors to this nation. What is the answer, though? What would you do if you could advise George Bush? And speaking of Bush and Gore, shortly on this program on the Savage Nation, we're going to have a commentary between myself, Michael Savage, and Pat Buchanan live on last night's debates and, of course, the situation in the Middle East and what Pat thinks ought to be done. I would like to hear what Gore has to say about what ought to be done. I'd like to hear what Bush has to say. And what's really disturbing today is we have war breaking out in the Middle East. We have a U.S. naval ship blown up. And Al Gore, who is the current vice president, so far as I know, hasn't said anything. Is this his example of what he would do as commander-in-chief, is say nothing until he gets an earphone in his ear and he's told what to do, how to smile, how not to smile? Is this your idea of a leader? Is this what you want for commander-in-chief? Well, I don't. He is incompetent to be the commander-in-chief. Bridget on line 7, what would you advise today?
Hi, Michael. It's very simple. We need to do what Ronald Reagan did. We need to take them out like we did to Libya. And we haven't heard a peep out of Gaddafi since.
And that would mean what?
Well, I think we need to unleash our military power, or what's left of it, on that country that let them blow up our ship today.
And that would be Yemen.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you don't mean obliterate the nation of Yemen. I'm sure you don't want to kill 100,000 innocent people who had nothing to do with it.
Well, no, but you had just said a few minutes ago that you thought that the ship that got hit should have just opened up and started to fire on the town. So
I believe that, yes, the captain of that ship should have given a warning to the townsfolk to clear out, given them a 5-hour warning, and then opened up and destroyed every military installation in that area and in that port. That's correct.
That's exactly what we should do.
Yes, they should have answered violence with violence, only they should have been more violent.
Right.
They should have shown who the boss is, because if the U.S. ship can be attacked by 2 men in a rubber raft, then none of our ships are safe anywhere. What good are all of these electronic devices that have no meaning whatsoever if 2 terrorists can come up with a raft and blow them out of the water? Tell me.
It's absolutely crazy.
Thank you. They never should have been permitted near that ship. We should have had our own flotilla of small boats around that ship, men armed with 50 caliber machine guns, creating a sanitary cordon around that ship. What kind of insanity is this that they would permit a warship into a terrorist nation like Yemen and not offer it any surrounding protection? I cannot understand the thinking of the U.S. Navy. But if you look at the stock footage, the answer is very clear. They show the new Navy. There's no longer a cigarette-smoking, cigar-chomping Admiral Halsey up there on the helm. Instead, you might have a mean-faced, clipped-haired feminist running the ship, or you might have some unqualified ghetto brat who couldn't get a job, who was hastily enlisted into the Navy and given a job way beyond his or her capacity. That's the problem today. And if no one else will say it, then I will be the one to say it. It's a sad day indeed, but we the people have to be heard from. And that's why I'm asking you what you would recommend. Mike in New Jersey, what do you recommend? Hello, Mike.
Hello, Mike.
Yes.
Hello, Mike. There we
yes.
go. Speaker. Your analysis is essentially correct.
Mike, you have to speak louder.
How's that? Is that better?
Go ahead, quick. Come on, we have 1 minute, please.
Your analysis is essentially correct, except...
Louder.
Except... Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, except I believe that it wasn't Arab terrorists. It's not their style. Arabs have not attacked military assets. I believe it was the Mossad.
Oh, here goes the myth of the Mossad.
Follow me here.
All right. Now, in other words, Israel did it again, of course. It's always the Jews.
No.
Yeah, what else, Mike, what else are you implying?
This is paybacks.
Mike, please, stop it. All right, that's a crackpot job here. You know, I love this. Their idea, you know, the anti-Semites, really, to be more specific, the anti-Jews out there, have such an incredible idea of how powerful Jews are. It's amazing. That if they trip and fall in their own backyard, they say the Mossad put the shovel in their way, that they're sure the Mossad planted the shovel because I mean, it's unbelievable to me. Some things are what they appear to be, sir, and it was in the port of Yemen. It was not in the port, and the Mossad generally doesn't blow themselves up. It's not in the religion of Judaism to martyr yourself. So your theory is totally crackpot and without any semblance of reality. These men blew themselves up. That complies only with one set of religious beliefs. 1-800-449-8255. What would you do in retaliation is the question. I shall return on the Savage Nation. All right, we have a U.S. naval ship attacked by Arab terrorists off the coast of Yemen as it is being refueled. And as I speak, the left-wing Panty Brigade, Paul Wellstone, is saying we don't know who did it. The disgraceful Secretary of Defense, who should be forced to resign, got up this morning and said we don't know who did it, when his own admiral got up and said it's a terrorist attack. Anyone with a brain can put together 2 and 2. These left-wing pinko commies are a disaster. They're a disgrace. And I've asked you what should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship. I told you it was no Admiral Halsey at the helm of that ship. I can guarantee it was a clipped-haired, mean-faced feminist who got the job, or a minority who didn't qualify for it. There was no reason to permit that rubber boat to get within any shooting distance of our ship. If they had any brains, they would have put a cordon around every ship with our own rafts and kept them away. Right now we have another person who you're very, very familiar with on the Savage Nation. And I'd like to again introduce Pat Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Pat, this is a disaster for this country, but more importantly, I believe it's a disaster for Clinton and Gore. 8 years they have placated the Arab terrorist Yasser Arafat. who was given 95% of his demands, and he said 100% of nothing, and now there's a war. What do we do here?
Well, quite obviously, the United States has got excellent intelligence. Like, I was in the White House when Gaddafi, we discovered that he was behind that attack on the discotheque in Berlin, and Ronald Reagan waited and got it confirmed by intelligence, and then one night the F-111s turned up over Tripoli and destroyed the headquarters of his Revolutionary Guard types there, and rolled one 500-pounder into his tent and almost killed him. And I think you're going to have to respond in kind, but more than in kind, to the terrorist organization that did this. And U.S. intelligence, I'm sure, is working on that right now. And we need an address, and when we find an address, we ought to go visit.
Pat Buchanan, this strikes me as extremely odd. I saw that the FBI is overseeing this investigation of the terrorist attack on a U.S. warship on foreign soil. We have U.S. naval intelligence. Who made Janet Reno the boss of the U.S. military? Does this strike you as odd?
This is absurd. The FBI is not responsible for uncovering terrorist activity abroad. The Central Intelligence Agency and the intelligence agencies of the various services, the DIA, our satellite intelligence, the NSA. This is not an FBI operation in my judgment.
Then why do you...
The FBI was the ones doing it.
Then why... Were you shocked to see that as well, Pat?
Well, I didn't see. I've been just coming down from Vermont, and I've not followed closely or seen the information that the FBI is looking into this. This is a military. This is an attack on an American warship. The FBI deals with domestic security.
That's why I think I am the only commentator in America who observed this and has questioned why is the FBI overseeing the investigation of the terrorist attack on our warship. And I think the answer is quite obvious, Pat. It is another power grab by the Clinton-Gore White House. It's part of this dictatorial mentality where they don't even trust their own military because they're liable to say something that's true, if you get what I mean. And this way they can spin it themselves by reporting it through Janet Reno up to Clinton and Gore. That's the way I see it. I wonder what you... Well, I think you've already mentioned that.
Well, Number two... This.
Yes.
Look, this is not an unsophisticated... This is not some individual kid who decided to be a suicide bomber on his own. When you go after an American warship, this has got to be plotted and planned for a good while. And usually it takes a government or some security agency behind people who do these things. Now, the United States has got the ability to intercept virtually what anyone says to anyone in the world and to go back and find out what was said. And so I think we ought to run down the organization that did it and the nation behind it. And this was clearly an unprovoked act of terrorism against an American warship. That's an act of war against the United States. And we used to know how to respond to acts of war.
And Pat, earlier before you joined us on the Savage Nation, I said if we had another time, another age, and another leadership, I believe captains of our ships had such independence that they could have responded on their own. If their ship was attacked, they could have unleashed a salvo into the local town, blown up the headquarters of the military and the police and said, you damn well sort out who did this to us because we're not going to wait for an investigation. But those days are long gone. I'm sure that today there were men aboard that ship, Pat Buchanan, who would have liked to invite the Arab terrorists aboard for some diversity training before they blew up the ship. That's the kind of mentality that's going on in the military today under Clinton and Gore. It's a nightmare.
Well, there's no doubt about it, but I do have to believe those men on those ship, and I hope they're all men. I pray to God they're all men. That ship, my guess is they're looking for a way to pay back the SOBs that did this to their friends and comrades.
Pat, I had a call before you came on from an Air Force base, and I was told that the men on our ships are not allowed to carry machine guns or sidearms on the deck of that ship, even in port, under the new rules of Clinton and Gore, that they could not even fire a machine gun at that raft if they had seen the intent. That's how peacenik-y the military has become today. But let's go to the topic at hand. You watched the debates last night, the so-called debate between Mr. Bush and Mr. Gore. Who do you think won?
To be honest, I think that I thought Bush got clobbered in the first debate in terms of substance. I thought he was awful. He wasn't up to it. I think he won the second. I think he won it last night. I thought he showed himself to be much more knowledgeable and assertive in foreign policy than Gore did. I, of course, tend to agree with some of the answers where he had disagreements with Gore in those few places. I tended to be closer to Bush, but I thought he won the debate, quite frankly. And I do think Gore's personality was less smarmy and unctuous than it was in that first debate, where he won decisively, but his personality was just repellent. So I think Bush won, but the clear thing that bothers me about it is, that you see the two of them, they're so close together that Jim Lehrer is constantly trying to tease out some difference or some disagreement between them. And the American people, I think, are much more diverse and have much different points of view and different takes on issues than you saw expressed up in those by those two baby boomers up there last night.
Look, Pat, I long have said you should have been there, Ralph Nader should have been there. There should have been a diversity of opinion, a diversity of argument. But you've raised a real frightening point for me. I've asked now, how the hell was Jim Lehrer picked to be the sole moderator for all three presidential debates? Moreover, the second insult is that another one of your old friends from CNN, probably a good man, but nevertheless to the left of center, Bernard Shaw, as the moderator. Every question last night was a Democrat question. I saw a ganging up on Bush by Lehrer and Gore. In fact, Lehrer led Gore at least 3 times in his attack on Bush. I could not believe my eyes. How did the Republicans permit the Democrats to choose the moderator? Why can't they use 3 different moderators? A liberal, a conservative, and a moderate. How did it become that Jim Lehrer is the God Almighty of all of the debates?
Look, in these presidential debate commissions, the Republicans and Democrats sit down and negotiate this out. If Republicans are unhappy with Jim Lehrer, they have only themselves to blame there, because they obviously had to go along with this. They had to go along with the sites, and they had to go along with the moderator, and they had both had to go along with the format, or there would have been no debates. And so I think they negotiated it out, and both of them accepted Lehrer.
That's why I've said, Pat Buchanan, that the Bush team, led by the Andover-Yale rowing team, they should be sent back to Connecticut or to New Haven to spend the rest of their happy lives in their grandmother's attic clipping coupons, because they're not doing the right job for the conservative movement at all. There's virtually no conservatism there, is there?
Well, there's not. They have decided this, that Gore is first, the country is generally satisfied with where we're going, so the Bush people will not challenge that. But they don't like how Clinton behaved and how he conducted himself, and they're terribly off-put by the personality of Al Gore. And therefore, if the Republicans just offer a more attractive package, with the in terms of the more attractive presenter with the same basic philosophy and direction, that they will back in and win the White House. And that is their strategy, and I think they probably feel that it's working pretty well.
Now, Pat, yesterday on some of my stations, your ad ran.
Right.
Your ad on immigration is absolutely superb. I don't know the agency that did it, but boy, is it good. With the whispering voices and the laughter, and then the announcer says, when you let illegals come into a country, they're going to bring contraband and drugs. You know the ad, right?
Well, I know all of them. I'm not familiar which one that is. But,
oh, boy,
I
Pat.
stand by them all.
Pat, that was such a good ad. In fact, I ran a 1-hour segment before the debates on illegal immigration and how it's destroying the social fabric of America and what it costs us. Is that a topic that you would have, if you were in the debates, would you have brought up illegal immigration with Bush and Gore?
I would have brought up illegal immigration, because it's what people are talking about. It's what talk show hosts are talking about. It is what's on people's minds. It is what dominates conversations in Southern California, Arizona, and much of the Southwest. I was in North Carolina in a rural area, and this fella told me, he said, we got a terrible problem out here with illegals coming in.
North Carolina.
Drugs and crime and what was happening. It's all over America, and neither of these national political parties will talk about it, because the illegal aliens coming into this country drive down wages, and the big businesses love it.
Pat, I'm a student of history. We know the barbarians broke the Roman Empire in 2. There is a good parallel. I don't care what people think of me. When you have people coming in who are illiterate in their own language, who have no allegiance to this nation, who do not know what the Pledge of Allegiance is, who could care less about America, to me it's like the Visigoths invading a nation. We've got to stop it, Pat, and I know that even if Bush is elected, there will be virtually no difference between him and the NutraSweet of the Democrat Party.
There will be nothing done, because the Republicans think if they stood up and spoke out vigorously on this, it would cost them the Hispanic vote, and they think the Hispanic vote represents their future. But I believe that Mexican-American citizens
Yes.
as much as anyone else would like our borders controlled, and to
More
like
so.
have all of us decide here how many folks come in from where and when, rather than have basically have our country be accepting millions of people who break laws, who come here not to be citizens of the United States, but simply to get jobs, and who could not care less about
Now,
the
Pat-
United States and what was good for America.
Yeah. Pat, you just got off an airplane. Where are you speaking with us in the Savage Nation today?
I've just got into McLean, Virginia. I just came down from Vermont, where they have the great battle over the civil unions.
Civil unions.
Civil unions are
In the land, you mean in the land of, you mean in the land of Bennett, you mean in the land of Ben and Jerry's, don't you?
Ben and Jerry's up there, right?
Yeah. And Pat, what are you doing tonight? Are you doing any other media appearances this evening?
I don't believe we're doing any tonight, but we got to get up very, very early tomorrow. I've got to drive to the eastern shore of Maryland. I'm speaking at Salisbury State College. And incidentally, the issue down there is illegal immigrants are pouring into those Purdue plants down there, the chicken pluckers, and it's become a serious social problem on the eastern shore of Maryland.
That's
not the way it was when I used to drive through there when I was a kid.
Well, I'll let you go, Pat. You need a good meal, a stiff drink, and a good night's sleep to keep up the good battle.
You stay in there and do battle yourself, Michael.
All right. God bless you, Pat Buchanan. Thanks for being with us on the Savage Nation.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yep, a tired Pat Buchanan joined us just now. He was very gracious. He just got off an airplane, as you heard. And we're going to return in a moment to the big issue, and that is the issue of you, the American people from sea to shining sea. What should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on a U.S. warship? We do know from Pat's statement that this is a declaration of war. And yet, as I speak with you, Paul Wellstone, the most liberal member of the Senate, is sitting up there saying, let's not rush to judgment. It's too soon to act. We don't know who did it. Wringing his hands. I have never seen anything like this in my life. Where are the men of our country? Where is the men of our leadership? I'm going to ask you what should be done. Maybe if we raise our voices in unison on the Savage Nation today, somebody will hear it, and this message will be sent to the powers on top. So again, I invite you to call 1-800-449-8255. What should be done? Not about Israel. They can fight their own battles. What should be done against Yemen for permitting this Arab terrorist attack on our U.S. warship is the question. I will be back in a minute to take your calls. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. There's a gigantic story of censorship emerging right now in this time of turmoil in America. American television networks were forced to make decisions about the use of video footage from two scenes of Middle East violence today. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News aired footage of a Palestinian mob attacking and killing 3 Israeli soldiers, butchering them, chopping them to pieces, throwing them out of a window. And so, therefore, while the scenes depicted a violent attack against human beings, who they were attacking was never actually made clear. Who they were attacking were 3 Jews being butchered in front of the Palestinian police station. At the same time, all 3 cable news networks promised to comply with a Pentagon request not to air footage of sailors injured in the attack on a U.S. warship in Yemen. Now, it's strange to me that we are seeing on our screens in America injured Palestinians being visited by Yasser Arafat, but we're not permitted to see images of our own naval men and women who may have been killed or injured in this terrorist attack. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Italy's TV aired striking pictures which showed the body of one of the Israelis dangling upside down, apparently attached to a rope. The body was then dropped from a window in the police station, where the mob stomped on it and beat the corpse with iron bars. A body was not visible in video clips aired by several American networks, but the crowd can be seen beating on something, the victim being unclear. Yet a few minutes later, CNN shows pictures of Palestinian children in a hospital being visited by Yasser Arafat. Ladies and gentlemen, we're living through very dangerous times and very perilous waters. This is no time to panic, but it's certainly a time to raise your voice and be heard. And I will tell you why. If we give in to this new Hitler, if we give in to this new Hitlerism, we are finished as a nation. We are finished as a nation. I want to read you something that's very, very pertinent. It may take me a minute or two to find it. And it's a letter from Natan Sharansky, a man who was imprisoned in the Soviet Union for many years. I want to find it, and here it is. Jerusalem, Dateline today, Thursday, October 12th, from Nathan Sharansky. And here's what he has to say. He says, nearly 20 years ago, confined to an 8x10 jail cell in a prison on the border of Siberia, he says, I was granted by my Soviet jailers the privilege of reading the latest copy of Pravda, official mouthpiece of the communist regime. Splashed across the front page was a condemnation of Ronald Reagan for having the temerity to call the Soviet Union an evil empire. Tapping on walls and talking through toilets, prisoners quickly spread the word of Ronald Reagan's provocation throughout the prison. We, the dissidents, were ecstatic. Finally, the leader of the free world had spoken the truth, a truth that burned inside the heart of each and every one of us. He then goes on to say, for decades, the moral authority of the Soviet Union had rarely been challenged. But sadly, he said, most of us were not blind to the truth. They were just frightened by the truth. The liberals in most of the world understood what the Soviet Union represented, but knowing the price of confrontation, they preferred to close their eyes to it, rationalizing their cowardice with morally comforting words such as peace and coexistence. They pursued the path of appeasement. I'm reading a letter from Nathan Sharansky. He then went on to say, today the nations of the free world also prefer to close their eyes to the truth in the Middle East in general and the Arab-Israeli conflict in particular. And he said, some who see Palestinian stone throwers as David to Israel's Goliath are again duped by the manipulations of a brutal dictator who sends children to the front lines to achieve through tragedy what he cannot achieve through diplomacy. He is talking about Yasser Arafat, the friend of Hillary Clinton. When I come back on the Savage Nation, I'll continue with a letter from Nathan Sharansky in his note, Afraid of the Truth, right here on the Savage Nation. I do not do sports talk. I'm Michael Savage. I'll take your calls from across America on what should be done about the bombing of a U.S. naval ship today in a port off the coast of Yemen. Remember, this show, it will be on for the next 2 hours. You must tell your friends to call in. The voice of the people will be heard today on the Savage Nation. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. There's a gigantic story of censorship emerging right now in this time of turmoil in America. American television networks were forced to make decisions about the use of video footage from 2 scenes of Middle East violence today. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News aired footage of a Palestinian mob attacking and killing 3 Israeli soldiers, butchering them, chopping them to pieces, throwing them out of a window. And so, therefore, while the scenes depicted a violent attack against human beings, who they were attacking was never actually made clear. Who they were attacking were 3 Jews being butchered in front of the Palestinian police station. At the same time, all 3 cable news networks promised to comply with a Pentagon request not to air footage of sailors injured in the attack on a U.S. warship in Yemen. Now, it's strange to me that we are seeing on our screens in America injured Palestinians being visited by Yasser Arafat, but we're not permitted to see images of our own naval men and women who may have been killed or injured in this terrorist attack. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Italy's TV aired striking pictures which showed the body of one of the Israelis dangling upside down, apparently attached to a rope. The body was then dropped from a window in the police station, where the mob stomped on it and beat the corpse with iron bars. A body was not visible in video clips aired by several American networks, but the crowd can be seen beating on something, the victim being unclear. Yet a few minutes later, CNN shows pictures of Palestinian children in a hospital being visited by Yasser Arafat. Ladies and gentlemen, we're living through very dangerous times and very perilous waters. This is no time to panic, but it's certainly a time to raise your voice and be heard. And I will tell you why. If we give in to this new Hitler, if we give in to this new Hitlerism, we are finished as a nation. We are finished as a nation. I want to read you something that's very, very pertinent. It may take me a minute or two to find it. And it's a letter from Natan Sharansky, a man who was imprisoned in the Soviet Union for many years. I want to find it, and here it is. Jerusalem, Dateline today, Thursday, October 12th, from Nathan Sharansky. And here's what he has to say. He says, nearly 20 years ago, confined to an 8x10 jail cell in a prison on the border of Siberia, he says, I was granted by my Soviet jailers the privilege of reading the latest copy of Pravda, official mouthpiece of the communist regime. Splashed across the front page was a condemnation of Ronald Reagan for having the temerity to call the Soviet Union an evil empire. Tapping on walls and talking through toilets, prisoners quickly spread the word of Ronald Reagan's provocation throughout the prison. We, the dissidents, were ecstatic. Finally, the leader of the free world had spoken the truth, a truth that burned inside the heart of each and every one of us. He then goes on to say, for decades, the moral authority of the Soviet Union had rarely been challenged. But sadly, he said, most of us were not blind to the truth. They were just frightened by the truth. The liberals in most of the world understood what the Soviet Union represented, but knowing the price of confrontation, they preferred to close their eyes to it, rationalizing their cowardice with morally comforting words such as peace and coexistence. They pursued the path of appeasement. I'm reading a letter from Nathan Sharansky. He then went on to say, today the nations of the free world also prefer to close their eyes to the truth in the Middle East in general and the Arab-Israeli conflict in particular. And he said, some who see Palestinian stone throwers as David to Israel's Goliath are again duped by the manipulations of a brutal dictator who sends children to the front lines to achieve through tragedy what he cannot achieve through diplomacy. He is talking about Yasser Arafat, the friend of Hillary Clinton. When I come back on the Savage Nation, I'll continue with a letter from Nathan Sharansky in his note, Afraid of the Truth, right here on the Savage Nation. I do not do sports talk. I'm Michael Savage. I'll take your calls from across America on what should be done about the bombing of a U.S. naval ship today in a port off the coast of Yemen. Remember, this show, it will be on for the next 2 hours. You must tell your friends to call in. The voice of the people will be heard today on the Savage Nation.
And now, the Bay Area's most revered national talk show host invades America. Here's Michael Savage. Under Clinton and Gore, our defense, our military has become really a hapless eunuch. Today we had the sad sight of one of our most advanced destroyers being blown up by two men in a raft in a suicide mission. They blew a gaping hole at the waterline. The ship is flooding. At least 6 are dead, 12 are missing, 35 injured. Those are the reports right now. And yet the United States is sitting there with their knees knocking, their hands are wringing. They don't know what to do. Most of the liberals, or the pacifists, if you want to call it, the conciliatory types, in other words, the pinko panty waists in the United States government, which is about 50 to 70% of them, are saying, we don't know who did it. We shouldn't do anything. We have no right to react. It is unbelievable. It's a disgrace. Have we become a nation of hapless eunuchs? I'll take your calls at 1-800-449-8255. I want to go back first to the letter from Nathan Sharansky, who spent years confined in a Soviet jail cell. He was one of the refuseniks. In other words, he was a dissident against communism. And here's what he said. Some who see Palestinian stone throwers as David to Israel's Goliath are again duped by the manipulations of a brutal dictator who sends children to the front lines to achieve through tragedy what he cannot achieve through diplomacy. Again, I'm reading from Nathan Sharansky. But most people are not so easily duped. They simply choose to blindfold themselves rather than confront a discomforting truth. Instead of pressuring Arab tyrants to free their own peoples from the yoke of oppression, the West prefers to view them as a stabilizing force. When the peace process began, Israel and the West had a remarkable opportunity to use their influence to ensure that the emerging Palestinian society could evolve into a liberal democratic state. Instead, they spent the better part of 10 years subsidizing tyranny. The goal was to strengthen Yasser Arafat and his PLO, supposedly a force for moderation and compromise. With his 40,000-man armed police force, Arafat was supposed to serve as Israel's proxy in the war on terror. Did you hear this? This policy, supported by Bill Clinton, was not designed to solve a genuine Palestinian human rights problem, but to export it. In the past 2 weeks, we have seen the consequences of this folly. The man who promised at Oslo to renounce the violent struggle against the Jewish state once again uses violence as an instrument of negotiation. His police have turned their guns against the state that armed them, while his kangaroo courts have released dozens of terrorists drenched with the blood of his partner in peace. Needing an external enemy to justify internal repression, Arafat continues to incite against Israel. New textbooks depict a map of Palestine that stretches from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea, but does not include a Jewish state. Arafat is so educating the next generation of Palestinians that they will soon take up arms in a holy jihad. In response to all this, the world can summon sufficient courage only to condemn a democratic Israel for defending itself against enemies within and without who seek its destruction. It is assailed for provoking the Palestinians by visiting our people's holiest site, when the real provocation is not our sovereignty over a Temple Mount that is the soul of the Jewish people, but our sovereignty, period. That's Nathan Sharansky, once a great hero of the West, and now completely ignored because he does not speak the communist line that is so popular today in the halls of Congress and in the media. The question to you is, what should we do about the attack on our warship? The phone number is 1-800-449-8255. Let's listen to what Hillary Clinton says ought to be done right here on the Savage Nation. Then I take your calls the minute I'm through with Hillary. Let's listen right now.
We must say clearly that terrorism of any kind must not be tolerated. It is not an acceptable negotiating tool.
What does that mean?
And the United States stands with those who stand against terrorism.
What does that mean?
And the United States will hold those accountable who have committed this act of terrorism.
Do you hear this? She doesn't say one thing that can be traced to anybody. It's classic Clinton doublespeak. Let's listen to the liar who would make a great leader in communist China, who speaks like a true cadre in China. Let's listen to this double-talking snake.
So want to express my shock and sorrow at the attack on the United States ship in Yemen.
Yeah,
my heart goes out to the families of the brave sailors.
Where have we heard that before, Hillary? Say something real. Oh, what? This is what you want for U.S. Senator? Well, you know what? You get the kind of leadership you deserve. Let's go around the country and around the state here and get some opinion of the people. Al in Amarillo, Texas, what's your opinion today?
I don't think we should do anything more than we did after the Israelis attacked the USS Liberty in 1967. They attacked it in international waters, broad daylight. They killed 34, wounded 171. They made every attempt to sink that ship with jet aircraft. They bombed it with napalm. They torpedoed it.
All right, well, let's come up to today, Amarillo, Texas. So what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting we should do no more than we did when the Israelis attacked us. Why should we do
wait, excuse me, Al. I got your point. Now let's come up to today again. You're saying then there should be no retaliation against any terrorism on a U.S. ship ever?
No, I think there should be. But why should we do any more than we did when the Israeli government deliberately attacked one of our ships with no combat capability?
All right, Al, let me ask you this. Al, are you on the side of Arafat or on the side of the Jews?
Actually, I don't care. They could both blow themselves up for all I care.
Mm-hmm. What do
see no
Al?
reason
What
why
Al?
we have to really
Hello,
get
Al. Al, Savage to Al. Al, what do you care about?
I care about the United States of America and our.
Wait a minute. Excuse me. Hello, Al. Time for a reality check. You care about the United States of America, but you'll take your resentment against Israel and put that above any kind of retaliation against the current attack on a U.S. warship? Does that make sense to you?
I'm just saying, why should we do any more than we've done with other people, or ignored, deliberately ignored?
Given that what you say may be valid, let's put that aside, but now let's come up to the present. A U.S. warship is attacked, men and women, maybe women, are killed, and you're saying do nothing?
First of all, we have to find out exactly who was responsible.
Oh, now you're saying you don't know. The head of naval operations said it was a terrorist attack.
Well,
but wait a minute. But wait, Al, excuse me. Do you have some information that we don't have?
Not on that attack.
Oh, well, thank you very much. You seem to be an expert on terrorist attacks, Al. And that was a very good voice processor that you used. Really fine. I wish I knew the exact model. It was a wonderful voice processor. It made you sound very American. Salt Lake City, Utah. Mickey, you're on the Savage Nation.
Hi. I never thought I'd say this, but after 8 years of watching the Clintons and how our military's been torn down and our defenses stripped like they have been, and now it's almost time for Clinton to leave office, and I'm beginning to wonder now if we should be looking in our own backyard for the causes of these problems.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm just wondering if Clinton's behind this, if it's a setup to... Because I've been telling my husband all year that I think that before we even have the elections that there's going to be a huge catastrophe that's going to keep him in office. And I know that sounds crazy, but just all the things that have been happening.
No, many Americans who fear Bill Clinton's devious, perverse behavior and his egomaniacal persona, the tendencies towards dictatorship, have feared an October surprise. Mm-hmm. It would be very, very easy to say this is the October surprise, which is to unravel the peace process, so-called, to cause a warship to be blown up, and then use that as a pretext, let it get bigger, and then use that as a pretext to declare a national emergency and stay in office. I know that's what you fear. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that's
what
I've been thinking.
Look, Mickey, many of us have that fear, but he has not yet said that he's going to suspend the elections, has he?
No, not yet.
All right. Well, let's deal with it when and if he says it, okay? Right now, let's deal with the reality of it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we have a bigger problem, which is a pacifist Al Gore, who is his understudy, who really should have said something today, and I haven't really heard much out of him. Matt, we have Al Gore, don't we? Let's listen to the most Al Gore could muster today when one of our warships has been attacked. Let's listen to him.
If this turns out to be a terrorist attack, then I want to make it clear on behalf of all of us.
Here we go.
Any terrorists should know that whoever is responsible for something like this will be met with a full and forceful and effective retaliatory response from the United States of America.
Does that sound like he means it? Did you hear a man who meant what he said, or did you hear somebody reading a script? I'll leave it to you, 1-800-449-8255. That is the phone number. Leadville, Colorado. What's your opinion? You're on the Savage Nation.
Hi, Mike. My feeling is that we have to know who the terrorists are as closely as we can tell, and whatever facilities they're using, level them. It was approximately a century ago we had a problem in Tripoli, Libya, and we engaged in battleship diplomacy. It works every time it's tried.
Gunboat diplomacy does work. Of course, it's from another time. That's why I said earlier in the show, Joe, that in those days the captain of a ship had the total autonomy to respond in kind. In other words, to make his own decision. If his ship was attacked in a foreign port, I can guarantee you he wouldn't have hesitated to unleash his guns on the downtown section of that town and say, you know what? I don't know who did this. Why don't you find out? It's your city. You invited us here to refuel us. You find out who did it. You must have a better chance of finding out than we do. Now, I realize we live in different times. Huh? Pardon me?
I'm a member of a 3-generation Navy family. I have 2 sons in the Navy currently, and I don't feel real comfortable about that under the current chicken in charge.
Joe, thank you for the call. And sadly, we learned in the last hour on the Savage Nation that, and I don't know if it's true, can someone confirm or deny this? My point was, why were there no men on deck on that ship with machine guns ready to blow the men away who came up with the raft, who blew up the Navy ship? I was told that in this new age of peacekeeping, our men do not have guns. They have no sidearms. They're locked up in a cabinet below decks. I can't believe that, because common sense would tell us that you bring an advanced naval ship into a foreign port, and the foreign port of Yemen is it was until recently a terrorist nation. What you do is you put out your own small boats around your ship, and you create a 50 to 100-foot barrier, letting only the tugboats come close, and even those boats would have to be heavily manned by your own troops to let them near such an important target. I don't know who's in charge of our ships. I don't know who's in charge of our Navy, but I will say this, and I'll make it very clear. If they spent as much money as they do on diversity training and sensitivity to homosexuality and diversity as they did on security and surveillance, I don't think this would have happened. I'll be back on Michael Savage.
10 years ago, this was middle America. Now it looks like the middle of a war zone. Drugs have made it to the suburbs. The drugs came from Mexico, America's supplier. As illegal immigrants pour over our borders, drugs are always close behind. Because when you don't control who enters the country, you can't control what they bring. And as illegal immigrants bring drugs into our country, they bring all of the horrors of drugs with them, ushering in crime and gang violence. Only one presidential candidate understands that you can't wage a war on drugs without fighting illegal immigration. Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan will take control of our border and cut off America's drug supply for good.
Hi, this is Pat Buchanan. On Election Day, send a message to the two parties that have abandoned us. Vote Buchanan for president and help us build a third party that puts Americans first.
To help, call 1-800-GO-PAT-GO. That's 1-800-GO-PAT-GO. Paid for by Buchanan Foster.
Welcome back to the Savage Nation. This is the Center for Truth Information right here on the Savage Nation. There will be no corporate talk. There will be no government talk. There will be no double talk. There'll only be straight talk. And I invite you not to call the program because there's absolutely no room. Every light is lit. I know that the people are dying to express their opinion. And, of course, again, I know that many, many people don't think that we should do anything on behalf of Israel. And I say you're right. The fact of the matter is Israel can take care of itself if they were let alone and didn't worry about what the world thinks about whether they should defend themselves or just go down in a river of blood. They are a sovereign nation. They have every right to defend their children and their women and to defend their borders. The question for us, though, today in the Savage Nation is, what do we as a people say? What do we think? What do we do? When one of our naval ships is attacked, a gaping hole ripped in it, suicide bombers are able to get so close to a ship of ours that they can virtually almost blow it in half, killing 6, wounding 12, injuring 30 some odd. That's the report as of right now. Why was that raft permitted to get so close to our naval ship? The answer is simple. That's because our guard was down, because the officers and the men have been beaten to death for the last 8 years by the Gore pacifism, the Gore liberalism. I'm shocked that they didn't invite the terrorists aboard for a diversity training session to teach them the evils of Christianity before they were killed, or perhaps even apologize for the sins of being alive. And I mean every word I'm saying to you. If we don't get rid of this left-wing madness, the country is doomed. There's no way it can survive. If we don't kick the diversity trainers out of our schools, if we don't kick the diversity trainers out of our corporate boards, we're finished. We will be turned into nothing. The nation will be left with nothing. We'll have no men left willing to defend the nation. Get rid of diversity trainers. Get rid of diversity training. Don't attend it. Hire a lawyer if you're forced to go along with it. Sue them and get them the hell out of there, and never apologize for being an American. Never apologize for being a white male. Never apologize for being a Christian or a Jew. I am telling you, you are facing the battle of your life, but you may not know it. And now I'll take your call so you can tell me what you think. Lake Charles, Louisiana, Carly, you're on the Savage Nation. What's on your mind today?
This is what's on my mind. I'm always so stunned when I listen to this show, but the point you brought up about Al Gore sounding like he was reading a script reminded me of something that happened to me. I was called for jury duty. I was eliminated because I was a fast talker.
You're kidding.
No, because the people, you know how attorneys now have assistants that help them pull, people for jury duty?
Yeah,
they don't like fast talkers because they say they're bright.
Oh,
and they
my
not
God.
only say that, they say they have the courage of their conviction. And they are decisive.
So, in other words, they only pick people for the jury who can be duped by a Johnny Cochran, who gives them a little rhyme such as, if the glove don't fit, you must have quit.
Right.
In other words, anybody who has more than a double-digit IQ is thrown off a jury today. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Hello, Carly, in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Hey, Carly.
Al Gore would be on the jury because he would be seen as someone who is not decisive and easily manipulated. And is this what we are going to have for leadership while the Middle East goes wacky?
Carly, let me ask you something. Carly, before you leave the show today, you got on the show and said you can't believe when you listen to this show. What did you mean by that?
I can't believe how insightful you are. I'm addicted to this show. I think it's wonderful.
Now, how long have you been listening to this fast-talking savage?
You fast talker, you. I guess about a month now.
Okay. And what age bracket are you in?
Oh, Lord. I'm under 30, but just barely.
And are you now, you live in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Are there any men equal to your intelligence down there, someone who can keep up with you?
Of course. No, really, there are. Brilliant people listen to this station. You hear them talk all the time on the air.
Okay.
No joke.
Carly, I now bestow upon you the honorary title of say the Chief Savagette in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And, of course, she can visit the website, as can you, by going on to thepaulreveresociety.com. There's really very little there that you won't find interesting. The phone number for this show today, though, to Savage Central for the Defense Information Center here is 1-800-449-8255. I'm Michael Savage. Welcome back to the Savage Nation, 1-800-449-8255. But every line is occupied. That caller from Louisiana just now is typical of what happens with this show once it's aired in a community. The people who can speak a little more rapidly than the brain dead love the show. The Gore-Clinton team that is either on Prozac or on Ritalin, those with less than a triple-digit IQ generally hate the show. And I'm betting that America has more people with at least 100 IQ than fewer people with 100 IQ across this nation. I was shocked, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to name names. I was shocked to listen to some major talk shows this morning in America. They were not talking about the violence in the Middle East. They were not talking about the attack on a U.S. warship. They stuck to programming that had been created for them last night. I am telling you that many people in this talk business are like mastodons. They can't think on their feet. They can't change. They can't use their own brain. Unless they have a staff creating information for them that they can then read and sound smart, they will not do it. And that is why Savage is going to rise to the top of the talk show heap across America. I do my own shows. I'm like you. I get up in the morning, I watch, I go onto the internet, I read a few newspapers, but they're worthless by and large. And I will tell you, I then get ready by forming my own opinions about what's going on in the world. And I will tell you that we need more people to do that in this country. Stop looking to the stooges to give you your ideas. Stop looking to the government to give you your ideas. Stop listening to the old line newscasters to give you their ideas. They're all part of the corporate structure, and they give you what is safe and friendly. Now, I'm not a fool. I can't tell you what I really want to say, because if I did, I wouldn't last 1 second on the radio. What you're getting is I would say a moderate image of what I actually believe. I'm going to leave the rest to you. You'll have to draw your own conclusions. Right now, I'll draw your conclusions. Howard, the cab driver, you're on the Savage Nation, and welcome to you. Howard. Howard, the cab driver, goodbye to you. Al, line 6, you're on the Savage Nation, welcome to you.
Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, I took in some of that interview with the Admiral today, and the reason that ship was in that place at all, in the first place, is because the Navy has lost so many ships they don't have their own oilers anymore.
You're kidding.
No, that's what the man said.
What do you mean lost so many ships?
He said they were worldwide. They were down to 110 ships. That means they don't have their own oilers. Normally that battle group would have its own oilers. They wouldn't have to be there.
How did we lose oil ships?
Well, that's part of the Clinton legacy, don't you know?
And wait a minute, didn't Bill Clinton just give up 10% or so, or a certain percentage of our strategic oil reserves? Didn't he withdraw? Didn't Al Gore sell off? And I'm the one who broke this story and published it in Newsmax about the Elk Hills Naval Oil Reserve. Al Gore sold it to a private company, Occidental Petroleum. Though that was oil for our naval ships. They said we didn't need the oil.
No, he was talking about the tankers, Mike. He said they lost their ships. They're down to 110 ships worldwide.
No, I understand that. But in addition to losing the oil tankers, Bill Clinton and Al Gore decided to give up fuel, oil, out of our strategic oil reserve in order to gain a few votes. We are today weaker than we were 2 weeks ago as a result of that.
You're absolutely right. And as far as the appeasers, I'll make a quote, I hope I get it right, of Churchill, who said, appeasers are like people who keep feeding a crocodile hoping that he'll eat them last.
Mm-hmm. Well, I understand that, Al. Thank you very much. Jerry in Bristol, Tennessee, you're on the Savage Nation. What's on your mind, sir?
Hi. Answering to your question, the response should be swift and commensurate with what happened. And within 12 hours, if they don't have the right person, they find somebody that is responsible or closely responsible and make the response fast. You don't wait around for something like this. That's the answer.
Well, it's true that it's like with a child. The child must know why they're being punished.
Exactly.
What you're saying is...
exactly what we need to do.
Well, that's right. Israel retaliated almost immediately after their men were butchered to death in front of the cameras.
Exactly.
And
we don't do it. We'll just be pussyfooting around, and then more things will happen. But it needs to be swift and just. And if somehow we have the smarts to do that, which I doubt this administration has, I think we have a bunch of arrogant. They are so depraved and dumb. It makes me sick. It really makes me sick.
It does. They are depraved. They think they're superior to the rest of us.
Exactly.
But as we can see, they're very dangerous, aren't they?
Very dangerous.
Thank you very much for the call on the Savage Nation. Now, Yemen, if you may not know it, where our ship was attacked, lies in the southern corner of the Arabian Peninsula. It's on the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. It's about 200,000 square miles. Its coastline along the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden is backed by mountains. The capital is the ancient city of Sana'a. Its population is more than 16 million, and it has the world's second fastest population growth rate. Second only to that of the Palestinian territories, which, by the way, has the largest growth rate in the world. Did you hear that one? Well, you heard it on the Savage Nation. Yemen's population of more than 16 million has the world's second fastest growth rate after that of the Palestinian territories. So I think that says something right there. Nearly all Yemenis are Muslim, but tribal, cultural, and religious differences have hampered political development. It's a very backward, somewhat of a medieval nation. What is Yemen's exports? What is the predominant exports of Yemen? It exports 350,000 barrels of oil a day. It has proven oil reserves of 4 billion barrels and huge gas reserves. Nevertheless, it is one of the Arab world's poorest states because its leaders are totally corrupt dictators. The people are let to starve and eat the droppings of camels while the leaders fly around getting as many blonde hookers as they can on their visits to London and New York, screaming all the time about the evils of capitalism. 1-800-449-8255, Jacksonville, Florida. Victoria, welcome to the Savage Nation.
I am backing up the gentleman who quoted Churchill, but I will quote FDR.
Mm-hmm.
Walk softly, but carry a big stick.
That was Theodore Roosevelt, and
correct.
Of course, it's still
right
an accurate description. Now, wait a minute. The U.S. destroyer that was blown up today certainly is a big stick. The big stick was almost broken in half by a very, very little stick. Why is that? How is that possible? The answer is because the big stick has a big moron behind it.
Thank you, sir. You said it better than I could because I'm
what good is it? Listen,
words that would not appear in a family newspaper.
Thank you, Victoria, in Jacksonville, Florida. The fact is that a big stick has no inherent motion of its own. A big stick means nothing unless it's held by a human being who, A, knows how to use the stick and is willing to use the stick. So the big stick really has no meaning. You can walk softly and carry a big stick, but if you're not willing to use the stick, as Bill Clinton apparently is not willing, or Al Gore is not willing, what good is a big stick? How much bigger does it get than a U.S. destroyer in a little nation? Catherine in Las Cruces, New Mexico, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Yes, well, I ultimately hold Gore, Clinton responsible for this attack on our ship. The way I look at it, whoever heard of the armed forces not being allowed to carry arms to defend themselves? And another point, let's not ever forget Mogadishu, what Clinton did to those young soldiers out of Fort Benning when they were pinned down. They were not allowed the material to defend themselves, and ultimately they were murdered. And I blame Clinton for that, and I'm still so outraged over that.
Well, that was Black. There's a great book on that called Black Hawk Down, and I ran that interview about a month ago on the Savage Nation, probably before the program was aired in your community. But we learned that the Rangers who went into Mogadishu were pinned down, and they were not given the tanks necessary to get them out of there because Clinton didn't want to create an international situation. Instead, he let them die there. That's what you're talking about. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm.
His absolute detestation and hatred of our military as well as all Americans. I mean, I just cannot believe something has not been done about that situation in Mogadishu. And, you know, we're running across the same thing here. They're not allowed to carry arms. That is, I just can't believe.
Well, let me say this to be fair. That may be a rumor from one of my callers on the Savage Nation, Catherine. I cannot confirm that the deck crew on that ship was not permitted to carry weapons while in port. I don't know that that's true, and I'm going to have to confirm that. But I thank you for listening so carefully. Now, let me tell you something. The USS Cole is a 505-foot U.S. Navy destroyer. It cost $1 billion. Did you know that? And it was equipped to protect itself against almost anything, they say, listen, except the raft that they say rammed into the ship with some explosives during a routine refueling. So you have $1 billion ship that can't defend itself. And now why can't it defend itself? The answer is, as I said to you, a big stick is useless unless you have a man who knows how to use it. That ship could have defended itself against the raft if they had put our own rafts around it, if they had established a chain link perimeter around it in the water, which could easily have been done to protect a $1 billion asset. But because we have a bunch of ass-is running our military into the ground, more interested in diversity training and in perversity training than in defense training, that is why it happened. I am telling you that William Cohen should be forced to resign today. It is our defense secretary who is ultimately responsible, if not the commander-in-chief. This is $1 billion ship. We've had a tremendous loss of life, and the head of this corporation ought to be made to retire. In Japan, when a corporation commits a crime of sorts, the head of that corporation apologizes and resigns. In France, when the blood supply was tainted, the head of the Health and Human Services Department not only apologized, but went to jail. Either we have responsibility in the Clinton-Gore regime or we don't. And the responsible head here is William Cohen. He ought to resign today and do the right thing instead of getting up there and crying every time. I'll be back. And so the American Maginot Line at sea today was penetrated by 2 Arab terrorists who were willing to die for their cause. A simple rubber ship blew a hole in this $1 billion warship that right now is threatened with sinking. The men are apparently trying to keep it
afloat. Here is one of the most advanced ships in the world, blown open by a rubber boat. It carries a crew of about 350. It is out of Norfolk, Virginia. It's a fabulous warship and apparently defenseless because the United States Navy no longer understands the dangers that it is threatened because of its own brainwashing. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the USS Cole is among only 101 U.S. naval ships in the entire world. I will repeat that. Under Clinton and Gore, we have only 101 ships in the entire U.S. Navy. 101 ships in the entire Navy. It was commissioned in 1996, and the USS Cole was named not for Nat King Cole, but for the first U.S. Marine killed at Iwo Jima, Sergeant Darrell S. Cole, of Flat River, Missouri. And it has a motto, Determined Warrior. The commander of the ship is Kirk S. Lippold. He has been the ship's commanding officer since June of 1999. Mr. Cole was a machine gunner when he was killed in action on February 19th, 1945, the day 30,000 Marines landed on the southeast coast of the Japanese-held island. So that's a little bit of the history of the USS Cole. But there's a huge story here. You have a $1 billion warship. It is capable of anti-submarine warfare. It is capable of anti-aircraft warfare. It is a $1 billion ship. It has anti-aircraft, anti-ship missiles, a cannon that can launch 5-inch shells more than 10 miles inland or across the sea. It has 2 Gatling guns that can each fire 50 bullets a second, and yet 2 men on a rubber raft were able to penetrate the perimeter of this ship and blow it up. Why was that possible? Somebody is accountable for this. Ultimately, it is the defense secretary. That is what every person in this country should be asking today. Instead of wringing their hands and giving homilies such as our hearts go out this, of course our hearts go out that. That's not the issue. The issue is who the hell is responsible. Make them get the hell out of there and put someone in who knows what they're doing. And for God's sakes, protect the men aboard these ships. Let them carry machine guns. Let them carry any deck weapon that they need, and let them blow apart any small craft that approaches that ship within 100 yards. Period. End of story. That should be the new rules of the U.S. Navy. What are they going to have, 18 commissions, 33 studies? They'll ask Madeleine Albright which brooch to wear, and then they'll come up with a nothing answer. That's the kind of mentality we have today in America. It's a disgrace. Rebecca in Salt Lake City, Utah. Welcome to the Savage Nation. What's on your mind today?
Well, I would just like to say the majority of this nation was duped by Clinton, put that phony evil man in power, which caused a huge chain reaction of incompetence throughout the nation, including the defense secretary.
Now, this defense secretary was never competent for the job. William Cohen is actually one of the most incompetent defense secretaries in history.
Well, that's obvious now. I mean, it's just pure stupidity to send a boat into, I don't know, it's just stupid to put a ship in that kind of situation. No guns, no fuel, I mean, it's just stupidity.
All right, thank you. It is stupidity, and the ultimate responsible party is William Cohen of the Defense Department. He should be forced to resign. Lake Charles, Louisiana. Mitch, welcome to the Savage Nation. Mitch. All right, thank you for calling the Savage Nation.
Well, first of all,
Mitch,
I'm
welcome.
an American citizen, very proud of it. I would defend this country with everything I've got, with no problem. Give you a background. I was born in the Middle East to a Christian family. I'm from a Christian belief. We have left our country 20 years ago. This is my country now. And I do believe there's I have a suggestion, let's put it like this, to ending the problems in the Middle East, especially in the West Bank. Of course, my father and mother lost all their land back in 1948, and my grandparents on both sides did. I have no problem with it. I'm a Christian, and I believe in the prophecy. And I have no problem with the Israeli state at all. But I think we should pay some of these Palestinians some money, compensation. This way they get them off their back. I know the way they think. I've lived there for a long time. And I tell you one thing, it's a long story, it's a long process, and the problems will always arise. I've lived among Muslims for a long time.